Hi, my name's Dave, and today I'm going to show you how to make Chicago-style deep dish pizza. The style of pizza that we're going to be making today is going to be in the vein of the original Duets, the original Unos, and Lou Malnatis. This is not going to be a stuffed pizza. There's no use for stuffed pizza at all. Giordano's and other stuffed places, there's no use for pizza like that. So this is going to be Lou Malnati's style pizza, which is going to be thin crust, nice and crispy, in a deep dish pan, lots of cheese, lots of tomato sauce, lots of toppings. It's going to take 24 hours to make at least. 24 hours to 36 hours is going to be your sweet spot in terms of how long you want your dough to work in the fridge. So plan on that. And let's get to it. Real quick, I'm gonna go over some very essential tools that you're gonna need to make this particular recipe. We're gonna be making 14-inch pizzas. I feel like those are the perfect size for the home. They'll fit in all ovens, and you only need to bust out a couple of them to feed a bunch of people, and if you're only feeding 2 people, then 1 will do and you'll have leftovers. So the first thing is a 14-inch deep dish pizza pan. I've used this, as you can see, it's nice and baked in, and it's got some seasoning in there. I got mine from Chicago Metallic. Lloyd Pans does a good job. I'll put some links below on where you guys can get that. But investing in a good deep dish pizza pan, if you're gonna be making deep dish pizza, is well worth it. Cast iron, no good. Don't use cast iron. A dedicated deep dish pizza pan isn't that expensive, and if you're gonna be making these a lot, which I do, then they're great. You're gonna wanna grab a pan holder. You're also gonna be able to get these from Chicago Metallic or Amazon or Lloyd Pans, but when you're dealing with pizza pans, it's nice to be able to grab them. You can always support underneath, but these are really handy. Halfway through the cooking process, you're gonna be spinning these pizzas 180 degrees. These make it really easy to do that. You're going to want to measure all of your ingredients by weight. So we're going to need to have 2 different scales. You're going to want to have a pocket scale, a digital pocket scale. These are used to weigh salt, yeast, sugars, anything that when you bake that are really small quantity ingredients. And then you're going to want just a regular kitchen scale as well. You're going to want to make sure both of these, just for ease of your use, have the same units of measurement. So if your pocket scale only comes in grams, then you're going to want to make sure your kitchen scale measures in grams too. Most kitchen scales nowadays, you'll be able to toggle between grams, pounds, kilograms, ounces. So you definitely need those 2 scales. In terms of ingredients, I'll put the entire baker's recipe in the link below, where you can look at the percentages of all of these ingredients. When you're working with a baking recipe, everything is measured by a percentage of the flour. I shouldn't say that because I don't know about all baking, but for pizza recipes, that's definitely true. So you're gonna see on the recipe, if you take a look at it, you're gonna see a percentage for each ingredient. And that is just the percentage against the flour weight, okay? So in this particular recipe I'm gonna make 2 dough balls for tomorrow because I have some people coming over for an outside get together. And so we're gonna double the recipe that I'm gonna give you, and that comes out to 27.36 ounces of all-purpose King Arthur flour, okay? So everything else that we measure out is gonna be a percentage of that 27.36. So we have 15.12 ounces of water. We have 0.192 ounces of ADY, which is activated dry yeast. We have 0.25 ounces of kosher salt, 0.35 ounces of butter. Mixed together here, we have 5.8 ounces of vegetable oil and 1.63 ounces of olive oil. And then in this little mascarpone tub, we have 4.84 ounces of semolina, fine ground semolina that I use red mill. It's really good. I've always used it. And that's basically all that's in this recipe. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're going to drop our yeast into this water. And you're gonna want to give that just a little bit of a stir. In that water is like a tiny pinch of sugar, just so that water has, or that yeast rather, has something to eat and activate. And that's gonna take about 10-12 minutes, and you're gonna start seeing it kind of like, they're gonna look like little fireworks in there of yeast that are blossoming, and they're basically rehydrating and reactivating, and they're gonna start to want to eat. And that's gonna be the magical process on how your dough is going to develop. So we're going to let that set, and then what we're going to do is we're going to add our salt to our flour, and we're also going to add our semolina to our flour, and both those are, and all of those dry ingredients are going to get mixed up real well in a big bowl. Try to go with an oversized bowl because you'd rather have too much bowl than not enough bowl and find yourself in a position where you're kneading this dough in a bowl that's way too small. So we're just mixing all this together, all the semolina, salt, and flour. And then we are going to screw off for a little while and wait for that yeast to activate, and then I'll come back and show you exactly how we're gonna knead this dough. This is gonna be what they call a no-knead dough. So we're gonna get the ingredients incorporated and get everything harmonious, and then we're gonna stop like messing with it. The less you knead this dough, the better. You don't want to overwork this dough at all. It's like kind of a cross between a pie dough and a pizza dough. So we're gonna let that yeast do its thing. All the rest of our ingredients are measured out, so as soon as that starts to work, we'll get back at you. Okay, so our yeast, I don't know, it's probably hard to see on the video, but our yeast is starting to get a little bit active. And so what we are going to do is, at this point, you've got all of your flour, salt, and semolina in this bowl down in here. And you've got your yeast and water and just a pinch of sugar in here. And we're just gonna dump this in. That's all in. Then we're gonna do the knife dragging method. The knife dragging method is, you're gonna take a knife and you're just gonna start dragging it. You're just gonna start dragging it through your flour. And we're just gonna do that. Spin the bowl while you do it until you feel like you can put your hands in there and start incorporating this a bit. Before we add the oil, this is going to be an extremely dry dough, and that's okay. That's what we're looking for. That's why you measure everything out by weight. You know that you've got the correct amount of ingredients in there. But we're going to continue to just drag our knife through so that we can incorporate as much of that flour into that water as possible before we dig our hands in. And before we dig our hands in, we're actually going to throw this butter in the microwave for like 45 seconds because we forgot to do that. That'll soften it up. Try not to do what I just did, which is get a little bit of flour outside of the bowl. But if it happens, obviously it's not the end of the world. Just try to keep that to a minimum. You've got your melted butter. We're just going to incorporate that into the rest of the oil. Mix that up a little bit. Now you've got all of your fats together. So we're going to knead this. And like I said, this is a no-knead dough. So what we're going to try and do is get as much of this flour incorporated as possible and start really kind of developing the gluten in there. This is going to be a tough dough to work with. It's going to be really flaky and dry. There's going to be a lot of flour in there that you are going to try to incorporate as best as you can. You're not going to get all of it, and that's okay. Maybe tear it apart a little bit. Get some of that dry flour in there. Push it down with your fingers and knuckles. This is going to be a very non-traditional pizza dough process that you got going on. Now that that's like that, we're going to let this sit for like 10, 15 minutes. All right, we'll let the water and the flour and the yeast kind of all absorb together after that very, very short knead. And like I said, guys, don't be afraid that you're gonna have excess flour down there. This is all fine, this is okay. You're gonna be potentially looking at this the first time you do it like you messed up, but you didn't. It's fine. Just gonna make an absolutely fantastic Chicago-style pizza. So we'll let this sit for like 10, 15 minutes, and then we're gonna come back to it. We're gonna put the oil in. We're gonna mix all that together. At that point, you're gonna think that you have an overly oily dough, and it's fine. It's gonna be absolutely delicious. And we'll see you in like 15 minutes. Okay, so it's been a few minutes. We are going to take this oil, and we are going to stick it in there, pour it in there rather, like that. Be careful because you don't want this to splash up on you because it's gonna take a second. Use the tips of my fingers to kind of stretch this dough out so that we can start really kind of incorporating that oil in. And all of that excess flour as well. You're going to be extremely surprised. Well, I shouldn't say that. You might be surprised at this point how soft this dough is going to end up getting once the yeast has done its work and it sits overnight in the fridge. We're going to wipe the bowl as much as we can to get all that residue. And you're going to want to knead this until you notice that it's not really grainy anymore. Because you'll notice that with some of that old or unincorporated flour rather, that you're gonna feel it in your hands. This is a very oily dough. We're gonna end up putting a little over a pound of cheese on this. Probably a half pound or 3/4 pounds of sausage. If you're on a diet, like I probably should be, this is not going to be a food that's included in your diet. This pizza is not very good for you. If you eat too much of it, you'll get a nice hangover the next day, which is great. Some beer, 1/4 pound of cheese, a bunch of sausage, and you're on your way. It's a great life. You shouldn't deprive yourself of this, but you shouldn't eat it every day either. So now that we've got it like that, we're pretty much done. I don't know how long that was, but it's still gonna be kind of crumbly. Still gonna be fall apart. It's gonna be kind of hard to make a cohesive ball, but that's just fine. You're gonna try to maybe go a little bit longer than that if it's that fall aparty. But just know that you're not gonna get an amazingly cohesive ball out of this because you're gonna be pressing it into, well, two things. One, the flour and the yeast are gonna, well, really the yeast is gonna do its work during your bulk ferment, which is your ferment after you do your kneading at room temperature or hopefully slightly above room temperature. If you have an oven, which you have to make this, but if your oven has a light on it rather, turn the oven light on, cover this in saran wrap, put it in there, that's perfect. My oven doesn't have a light, so I preheat my oven for like 30 seconds just to get the coils just a tiny bit warm, and then I cancel the preheat and turn off the oven completely. It literally needs like 30 seconds of preheat, and then the insulation from the oven will keep it just slightly above room temperature, which is where this bulk ferment happens. And so I've told my friends that have made this dough recipe, you want to get it to the point where it's kind of looks like a brain. We're going to cover this with saran wrap, and we're going to put it away for 2 hours for a bulk ferment. And in that bulk ferment, that yeast is going to do its work. It's going to come together. It's going to be much more reassuring to the first time Chicago style pizza dough maker that it's going to end up turning out okay. And it'll start coming together, and you're going to start trusting the process a little bit. So I'm going to wipe the rim of this bowl down a bit just so that the cling wrap sticks real well. And then we're going to just plastic wrap it, and we're going to throw it in a warm place. Barely warmer than room temperature is fine. 2 hours. We'll see you back then. Okay, so it's been like 2 or so hours, and we are going to go into our little warm spot, wherever that is for you, either on top of the fridge or in an oven with a light on or something like that. And we're gonna take a look, and you're going to see a dough that is significantly bigger than the dough that you put in there. So that's exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for the yeast to do its job. This dough is gonna rise. I'm gonna wash my hands real quick and we'll get it out. So, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this and we're just gonna throw it into a Cambro. You can throw it into any container that you have, but just make sure that it has a little bit of room. And because what you're gonna notice is that even though the cold is gonna make the yeast more dormant than it would be if it were sitting out, it is still going to rise. I don't know if you can see this, but if you push on it, it's gonna kind of deflate a little bit, which is what we want. And now, as you can tell, if you flip it over, it's starting to come together. It's starting to come together like a dough that you should be able to press into a pan tomorrow. And it's gonna be absolutely fantastic. So I always just throw this into a Cambro. Some pizza doughs, you really need to like punch down, and like bread doughs, you need to punch down and whatnot. Just handling this, it's such a weighty dough that it's gonna punch down on its own. I take the saran wrap that we've been using and I kind of set it in there just to protect, just real loose, just to protect against the formation of a skin. Tomorrow it's gonna come up a little bit, or throughout the night it's gonna come up a little bit in the fridge. But there definitely is still an air pocket in there, and so sometimes you can develop a little bit of a skin on there, which you don't want. It's not ideal. So this is gonna go into the refrigerator for 24 hours. Like I said, 24 hours it's ready to use. 36 hours it's ready to use. Anything past that, you're gonna start seeing a little bit of diminishing returns. Anything after about 3 days, you're gonna not have the best pizza in the world. Tomorrow, when you're planning on making your pizza, make sure to pull your dough at least 2 hours, preferably 3 hours before you want to manipulate your dough and make your pizza, so that the dough comes up to room temperature and you'll be able to press it into the pan without any issue whatsoever. You don't want to work with this dough, or really any pizza dough, when it's real cold. So time it out that you're giving yourself 3.5 hours before you want to eat to pull your dough out of the fridge. We're gonna throw it in the fridge right now, and we'll see you guys tomorrow for pizza making. Okay, so it's been a little bit less than 24 hours, but that'll work just fine. We've had our dough on the counter for about 3 hours. As you can see, it's expanded, gotten real soft. It's going to be ready to manipulate and put into the pan. Here's what we're gonna do for our first pizza. We're gonna do 6-in-1 tomatoes. I endorse 2 different types of tomatoes to put on this pizza. Escalon 6-in-1s or Sclafanis. Those are gonna be the tomatoes that match this pizza great. The only thing that you're gonna need for this tomato sauce, in my opinion, is salt and sugar. Salt, just a little bit, and a little bit of sugar to kind of balance out that acidity. You're just gonna mix that up. I know that's a very simple sauce, but you have to remember you've got a very buttery crust. You got a lot of cheese. Typically, you're gonna be putting a lot of toppings on this. We got garlic, we've got Parmesan cheese, we got all sorts of stuff. This bright, fresh, slightly acidic sauce just works perfectly, and you just don't need much in it. As long as that tastes well balanced to you, you're good to go. And as you can see by what we put in there, we didn't need much. Here's what we're gonna do for toppings today. Mozzarella cheese, sliced. Provolone cheese, non-smoked, sliced. Pre-grated Parmesan, and I know that any of you that cook out there are just absolutely pulling your hair out because of pre-grated Parmesan. This stuff is typically garbage. There's a reason we use this, and I'll get to that when we use it. We're gonna do pepperoni. We're gonna do a little bit of minced garlic, mushrooms that I par-cooked a little bit just to get the water out, a little bit of the water, and some raw Italian sausage. Do not ever put cooked Italian sausage on your pizza. It doesn't matter if it's a thin crust, Chicago style, tavern style, a New York style, a deep dish, a stuff. Doesn't matter what type of pizza you're making. Do not ever put cooked sausage on your pizza. You will cook it when you cook the pizza. You can put cooked sausage on a pizza, just make sure that you don't serve it to anybody. The first thing we're gonna start off with is butter flavored Crisco. can throw a dollop in your pan like that. You can use clarified butter. If you're in a real pinch, you can use vegetable oil. Don't use butter. Regular butter has milk solids and liquids that will evaporate. And when that happens, it kind of soggies your crust a little bit. So we're just taking a paper towel and we're wiping this butter flavored Crisco in here. Crisco is great for baking. Get that all around, okay? We're gonna put this onto our cutting board. We're gonna grab one of our pizza doughs over here. Pizza dough has had time to come up to room temperature and relax. It's nice and pliable. You're able to work it really well. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna start pressing it out from the inside outward, okay? And you're just gonna do everything you can to kind of get even coverage. If this is a room temperature dough, you will have an easy time doing this. If you notice that this is a difficult process, then that means that your dough is not relaxed enough and you need to just leave it and come back to it in a short amount of time. But that was really easy for us, right? We don't have any bare spots. All of this looks pretty good. And then the next thing that we're gonna do is we're going to make sure that you pull a little bit from the inside so that you don't create a weak spot around the lip. And you're gonna start pulling that pizza up the ledge. And this is why it's a little bit of a misnomer that Chicago pizza deep dish pizza crust is really thick. It's not really thick. It's thin. You're pinching it up the sides. This is going to be a thin crust along the outside. And until you get used to it, you can take your time to make sure that you don't create any holes. But this should be a fairly easy, simple process. And you're just going to make sure that it's all relatively even. And that's going to produce, in my opinion, one of the best parts of the pizza is the outer crust. That buttery, flaky, crispy, amazing crust. Mozzarella cheese, you want to go low moisture, whole milk if you can. We're going to grab a bunch of it. You want to do sliced because what we're going to end up doing is just a little bit of overlap. Try and cover that pizza as best you can with squares. And then what I do is I'll take like scraps and kind of fill in some of those areas. It's nice to just fold a piece in half, rip it, get some of those bare spots. Looks like we have a couple over here that can probably get filled up. You don't have to, that's it, right? So you can order these ingredients however you want to order them. So with the exception of you want your mozzarella on the bottom. So if you do mozzarella, you can do then your provolone, you can then do your sauce and then all of your toppings if you want. Just know that your pepperoni, your sausage, and some of your other ingredients, like if you were to put bacon on this or Canadian bacon or any other type of meat that might like crisp up and burn, that might happen. The way that I personally like to do it, and I know that you don't get the caramelization on the meats, but for some reason this just works the best flavor-wise, is I do mozzarella down first, and then I do my meats, and then I'll do my provolone, and then I'll do my sauce, then I'll do my subpar, sub-quality grated Parmesan, and then I'll do my vegetables, because vegetables have a lot of water in them, and they can do just fine on the surface. First thing I'm gonna do is grab my chunk of raw sausage, and we're always gonna use raw sausage on pizza, always. This is going to be going into a 470 degree oven, which you should have preheated at this point. I probably should have said that earlier. I'm pinching this sausage so that's a little bit flat. It'll fit underneath the pepperoni and the provolone best that way. Once you have coverage with the sausage that you're happy with, wash your hands because you just dealt with a raw meat product. And then jump over to your other meats if you're using them. Today we're going to use pepperoni. Some people like to microwave their pepperoni for just maybe 30 seconds and then soak up the pepperoni grease with a towel just to keep your pizza less greasy. You can absolutely do that. I do that sometimes for sure. Today we are not doing that because this pepperoni is not the greatest pepperoni in the world. It's the only stuff they had at the store when I went yesterday. Now that we got our meats down, we're gonna do some coverage with provolone cheese, non-smoked sliced provolone. You're not gonna do as much provolone as you do mozzarella, but you still wanna get decent coverage. All right, just like that, that's perfect. If I had to guess, if we were to measure that by weight, you were probably using a mozzarella to provolone mixture, you know, 65-35%, maybe 60-40, probably 65-35. There's not that much provolone on there, but it's enough to get it covered, all right? So then you're gonna take your sauce mixture. If you like your sauce drier and thicker, you can take this entire mixture right here and you can put it into a fine strainer and let it sit for like an hour and it'll strain off a lot of the water. I don't like a really, really thick, pasty sauce. This works just great for me, and I know that it's going to evaporate some during the cooking process. I'm not going to fast forward through this because this is an important part of the process, is just making sure that you get good, even coverage. Make sure that you don't get any of this sauce up over the top of your crust so that it can seep down in between your crust and the pan. I'm going to try and keep moisture out of that area as best as possible. So that's pretty nice even coverage. We like a little bit of cheese coming out of here because that's the spots that'll brown up a little bit. We like that. Now, this is where this pre-grated Parmesan comes in. There's no other cooking application that I use for pre-grated Parmesan. Usually you grate off of the block, but this stuff is kind of like a little bit like a moisture soaker. And when you take that tomato juice and you soak it up with this pre-grated Parm, that's a good thing. It kind of thickens up your sauce a little bit, and if you're using Parmesan to thicken up your sauce, I don't know. I've heard of worse thickeners. Now we're doing a little bit of minced garlic. I like some minced garlic right on that tomato sauce. It kind of cooks into that sauce a little bit. And then the very last thing we're gonna do is our most liquidy ingredient, which is gonna be fresh. I know that they probably look like they're canned because I kind of par cooked them a little bit, but fresh par cooked mushrooms. You don't have to par cook them if you don't want, but just realize that they're going to release a lot of moisture. Make sure you get even coverage. That pizza's probably 5 or 6 pounds. Big pizza. We're gonna go into a 470 degree oven in the middle rack. We're gonna go 13 minutes. Then we're gonna spin it 180 degrees, go 13 minutes again. Depending on your oven, you might need to go an extra 4 minutes, maybe an extra 2 minutes, maybe a little bit longer than 26 minutes. Every oven varies. If you have an exposed heating element at the bottom of your oven, be very careful about burning the bottom of your pizza. Sometimes if I cook on an oven that I've never cooked on before and it has an exposed element on the bottom, I'll slide a cookie tray on the bottom rack and then put the pizza on the middle rack, and then when I spin it 180 degrees, I'll take that cookie sheet out. And that just creates a little bit of a barrier between that heating element and the bottom of the pizza. 470 degrees, for me, a perfect pizza in this oven comes 13 minutes, spin 180 degrees, 13 minutes again. We'll see you guys back in 26 minutes. Okay, so it has been 26 or so minutes, maybe 26 and a half minutes. And we're gonna pull this thing out. So I didn't show you the 180 degree spin because I'm sure you know how to do that on your own. We're gonna grab it with a pan grabber and we're gonna support it underneath. We're gonna bring it right up here on top. So we got that. We're gonna grab ourselves a spatula. Have that at the ready on our cutting board, and we're gonna give this maybe like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes just to chill and relax for a second. It's very hot right now. So we're gonna give it a few minutes and then we'll get back at you. Okay, so we took this pizza out of the oven at 26 minutes. It was really kind of between 26 and 27 minutes. We let it rest for a few minutes so that it can kind of come together a little bit. You're gonna notice that when it pulls away from the pan a little bit, you see how it's kind of pulled away from the pan on its own? It's good to go. We're gonna bring it over to our cutting board, and this really is the only kind of sort of relatively difficult part about this entire pizza making process. You wanna grab your pizza probably in like the 9 o'clock position, and at the 5 o'clock position, just slip it out. I don't know if there's a better way to showcase that other than you just put it under there and then just kind of separate the two. You got to make it swift, make that a swift action, and your pizza will be on its cutting board. We're gonna grab a rocker, 21-inch pizza rocker or whatever. Best way to do it is to just stab it through the crust, rock, come 90 degrees, rock, split the difference, split the difference. You've got yourself an extremely nice Chicago style pizza. Underneath here, this crust, if you can see it, it's gonna be nice and golden brown. It's gonna be nice and crispy. If you have any questions whatsoever, drop them in the comments below. I'll answer them. And I really hope that you enjoy making pizza. Make it your own pizza. Have fun with it. If you want to make a pizza that's exactly like Lou Malnatis, that's it. Happy pizza making.